everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Globe Interview Series. I'm your host, Sunlight, and today I'm delighted to welcome onto the show Evin McMullen, CEO of Disco, your identity for the Metaverse. Hey Evin, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. So let's, have a chat about, so we're at the Barcelona Avalanche Summit, right? So, and you were a speaker on Tuesday, so the first day. So how did that go?
It was wonderful. I've been really surprised and delighted by the vibrant Avalanche community. This is the first large gathering I've attended that, brings together this specific community. And so it's been wonderful to learn about so many different projects that are evolving past, what's publicly visible, and also to see the focus on multi-chain collaboration. There definitely seems to be something in the air, a spark of inspiration, and the promise of so many amazing projects yet to come.
Amazing, yeah. And you were talking earlier about your similes with Taylor Swift and credentials. Can you go a little bit into that? So, for anyone watching at home, you can relate, hopefully. I don't know.
Absolutely. So the talk that I gave was about the history of fun in our metaverse, starting with Chaucer and how he brought the word fun into the English language through the development of the myriad reflector, the predecessor of the modern disco ball that was made of thousands of pieces of handcrafted glass with a light inside, allowing it to turn any room into an instant party, like the disco balls we know today. So some of the use cases that I shared for identity and credentialing, which we'll get into, I'm sure, later in this conversation, but we had a fun conversation about things like, how might Taylor Swift be able to curate her preferences, such as not wanting to listen to John Mayer's music, so that when she goes into restaurants in the future, they can act accordingly and make sure that the music is to her preference. Or, for example, because Bella Hadid has been on dozens of Vogue covers, Vogue might issue a credential to her attesting to this fact, which a bot cannot accomplish, right? Bots have never been on the cover of Vogue. And so this credential proving her participation as a cover model is also tantamount to an anti-Sybil proof, evidence that she is indeed a human being. So I think it's always really fun to incorporate real-life potential use cases that are resonant with more than just your average protocol community, that call upon the figures and pop culture that we all enjoy in our free time as well.
Yeah, amazing. It's so fun to see use cases outside of the tech world.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I really think that we can broaden our definition of what the tech world means. So my personal definition of the metaverse is one where you can show up in any digital or physical environment and receive a personalized experience as a result of the parts of yourself that you choose to share. And so what this means is that we can broaden our expectations of the world around us. We can anticipate smart environments that can move doors and furniture to our liking, or persistent digital environments that are able to accommodate our preferences without us having to fill out forms when we first arrive.
Amazing, thank you. So can you go into a little bit about your background and how you found your journey into the blockchain industry?
Absolutely. So when I was much younger, a little over 10 years ago, I grew up very interested in technology. I spent my summers as a kid hanging out, bothering the folks in the Microsoft research offices in Redmond, going to computer science and robotics camp. And when I started undergrad, I became very excited by free and open source software and Creative Commons licenses, the legal wrappers we can use to make data more free. And I had the absolute best computer science professor of all time, Elizabeth Stark, who is now an incredible crypto leader in her own right as CEO and founder of Lightning Labs. But at the time, she was my teacher and helped to inspire us to explore the world of decentralized ledgers that had really just come onto the scene. And so that's how I first fell in love with Bitcoin. And that concept is, of course, lived rent-free in my head ever since, and inspired me to think about the ways that censorship-resistant networks can bring value to our everyday lives outside of the screen. And so it's sort of through that experience that I began exploring the various communities that began to pop up around, early tokens, and then eventually into the Ethereum ecosystem.
So when searching up about, identity on the web, really kind of key terms such as DIDs, verifiable credentials, and self-sovereignty comes up. So could you talk us through these kind of key terms?
Absolutely. So when we think about the promise that Web3 enables, self-sovereignty is one of the first things that arises. The ability for us to own our own public and private key pairs enabled by these decentralized ledgers means that for the first time ever, we can enjoy true ownership of digital assets, meaning that they are private to us and us alone. They cannot be intercepted or obtained or seized by a counterparty if they are included in a wallet, a sort of self-custodial wallet that we have. And so this self-sovereignty, this ownership and control of our own assets should indeed extend to our data as well, perhaps even more personal to us than our Bitcoin or our AVAX tokens or our Ethereum. And so self-sovereignty in the context of identity means the ability to own and control one's expression of self. And that includes all of the data that captures what makes you, you, the data that describes you, what you know, who you know, what you've accomplished, where you've been, your sense of humor, who thinks you're cool. And so this leads us to the question, well, how do we capture all of that data? Where does it go? What form does it live in? And so fortunately, we have an incredible standards community of researchers, academics, and folks who've been around the digital identity and network space for many years. And so one such organization, the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, I like to call them the high wizards of the internet, but they're the folks who, in the early days of the internet, facilitated the connection of our disparate networks and their ability to, mold into the internet that we know and love today. And so a few years ago, these high wizards of the internet at the W3C realized, oh my gosh, we've got more atomic networks that aren't talking to each other. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Polkadot, Solana, the list goes on. And so this organization developed the ability for our public addresses, the public keys as we enjoy them, to, and as well as Web2 identifiers like DNS records, email addresses, and PGP keys. They created a technical method where we can basically have an alias for our address that can speak to all of those other addresses without the need to translate that data, pay for it to go across a bridge, or compute upon it with unnecessary complexity. And so basically what DIDs, decentralized identifiers, allow is for us to take any number of public identifiers. I think there's probably 90 plus different flavors that we can choose. As I said earlier, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, email, PGP, etc. And now we can all talk to each other using those identifiers when we leverage a decentralized identifier method. So now that everybody's addresses, regardless of where those names come from, they're all ready to talk to each other, the question is, what is that common language? So a verifiable credential is such a solution. So these technical standards basically are a statement made by one party about another party or about itself. And so a verifiable credential is almost like a digital form of those plastic identification cards you carry around in your wallet. A proof of membership, your government ID, your gym membership, your student ID. And so these attestations, signed blobs of JSON with no specific signature scheme, and so we can enjoy all these different identifiers, sign with all these different identifiers. These pieces of data, because they are written about a subject, are then owned and controlled by that subject. So perhaps I might receive a credential from my employer attesting to the fact that I work there, and that credential will then be owned and controlled by me. And I can store it, in the case of Disco with my team, we encrypt it against your public key and drop it into your own decentralized storage. So this acts almost like a personal data backpack where you can run around the metaverse in your physical and digital environments and receive attestations, these credentials describing what you've been up to, what events you've gone to, what accomplishments you've had, what you've participated in, the contributions you've made to DAOs or to enterprises. And with each action, you pick up another credential, you throw it in your backpack, and then in the future, if you need to show proof of having done that activity, you simply pull it out of your backpack and share it with the granularity and publicity that you're comfortable with. And so this basically inverts the internet, so that instead of creating awesome data in the apps where you hang out and just leaving it there for Mark Zuckerberg to consume so he can, I don't know, sell you more stuff, instead that data goes into your data backpack, is encrypted against your public key, put into your decentralized storage, and it comes with you. So that the next time you visit an app, you can decide which parts of your data you would like to share, and that app can provide a personalized experience to you as a result.
Amazing. So where do these credentials live?
So that's a great question. These credentials, just because they are JSON files, are very simple pieces of sort of strings of numbers and letters, and they can live wherever a user would like them to live. So if I have a bunch of credentials written about me, I can do a lot of things with them. I can print them off in the form of QR codes and carry them around in a folder, which is probably not very practical, so I wouldn't really recommend that. I can store them on the hardware enclave of my device, so I can keep them locally on, let's say, my phone, especially if I'm concerned about cell service. I want to make sure that they're readily available to me. But in the case of Disco, we are storing them in Ceramic, which is an amazing decentralized storage solution from our friends at 3Box Labs. We're also very excited to incorporate Kepler, which is a decentralized private storage solution from our friends at Spruce ID, as well as the storage solution from our friends at Privy. We think it's very important that a user, in the same way that they have the autonomy and self-sovereignty to decide which names they would like to go by, which public addresses they want to be known by, which, social identifiers, Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn, YouTube, all those things they want to use, we believe that these individuals should also have the choice of where their data goes to sleep at night, where they store it, and also have the freedom to move that data if a storage solution no longer serves them.
So how can verifiable credentials be trusted and, protected against manipulation?
That is an excellent question. So often we worry in our ecosystem, how do we know whether data has been tampered with when we encounter it? So one thing that's really great about verifiable credentials is that, like the water bottle, we had to pour water into our glasses, there is a tamper-evident seal. So your verifiable credentials are, they're statements written by one party, about another, about you, and signed by that issuing party, and then encrypted. So that you can resolve the credential to understand who said what about whom when. But if that credential is tampered with in any way, it will not resolve, and you will end up with an unreadable string of gobbledygook. And so these sort of self-contained little units of data are, though very simple from a structural perspective, have very high integrity. It's immediately evident if someone has tampered with that data or altered it, which is why verifiable credentials are especially awesome if you plan to move your data. Because if you have a bucket of raw data and you want to move it somewhere else, it's really hard to tell whether that data has been, amended or violated in its journey to its new destination.
Perfect, thank you. So, what would you say is the difference between identity and identifiers?
Yes. So identity means a lot of things to us in a lot of different ways. But in the context of our Web3 ecosystem, I like to think of identity as a conglomerate of a bunch of different things. So starting off with identifiers, I think of an identifier as a name. Your name can be your government name. So I go by Evin, that's one of my identifiers. But I also go by a lot of other names. On Twitter, I go by @ProvenAuthority. Follow me. And in the Ethereum ecosystem, I go by OX12. I actually don't know my address, but I have an Ethereum address, a Bitcoin address, an Avalanche address, Solana, Polygon, although part of that namespace is the same as my Ethereum address. And so identifiers are simply the names that we go by in the world, or the traits that signal who we are or some facet of our person. And so an identity, in my humble estimation, is the combination of your identifier, your name, and a list of what you've been up to. So a list of your activities, your accomplishments, and then the ability to control both. So a show of control over your name and the data that describes you. And so in Web3, your public-private key pair is a full identity on its own because it's a name, your address, it's a list of stuff you've done, your on-chain transaction history, and your ability to sign transactions from your address, which shows your control over your name and your past history.
So what are the necessary steps in order to, keep your identity safe on Web3?
That is a great question. So in order to think about how we keep ourselves safe, we need to think about what are the risk surfaces. So today in Web3, your identity, your personality can really only be expressed on a public blockchain, which means that your identity is largely comprised of your public address and the assets that you have mapped to it, what you have purchased, what you have obtained, what you have earned, what you've been gifted, what you've stolen if you're a bad guy. And so what this means is that the sort of lock and key that protect our assets and our identity in this Web3 ecosystem really comes down to our seed phrase. That 12 or 24 or 26, I forget how many now, many word phrase that permits us to recover or reset a password in an app and to prove true ownership of that address and its associated data. And so personally, what I recommend that my friends do is that when we begin our journey to obtain a Web3 identity, to obtain a wallet address, we start off with a clean email address that we haven't used before. We use that email address to sign up for a wallet and to download and set that up. I recommend that you take the seed phrase you receive from your new wallet and you engrave it on some metal plates. I know it sounds like a lot, but trust me, you don't want those to go anywhere and you don't want to spill a coffee on a piece of paper with your seed phrase. I know a lot of people who've done that before. It's quite a challenge.
Oh no.
And so you can engrave your seed phrase on a metal plate and store that somewhere like a bank vault. Kind of funny using TradFi to secure our Web3 identity. There are also other ways to do this. You can keep an encrypted copy of your keys in a secure place, perhaps on a USB drive that you've removed from the internet and put in a safe location. And I also recommend that people keep a duplicate copy of these keys. But the most important thing to remember is that your seed phrase is private to you and you alone. And so no matter how much you love them, you never give them your seed phrase.
So before we go into what you're doing at Disco, what do you mean by reputation in Web3?
So reputation in Web3 right now is quite limited. I think of your reputation as the compendium of activities and accomplishments and tasks that you've been up to. What have you been doing? And so right now, most of that reputation can only be expressed in on-chain forms. And so a lot of that is, what votes from DAOs have you participated in? What tokens have you purchased? What airdrops have you received? What NFTs have you acquired? But as we know, our reputation, the consequences of our actions in the world around us, our reputation resounds far beyond the public chain. Even in an organization like a DAO, your ready participation in voting and financial contributions may not offset the fact that you're a jerk to the other people in the Discord. And so we need more expressive primitives to capture the variety of human activity, which is also why I love verifiable credentials, because you can put any data that you want into such a credential. So verifiable credentials are very different than our on-chain tokens because they are not public and immutable forever. Rather, they are private by default. They're revocable or can be set to expire. They are shared with the consent of the user, and so can be shared in whatever level of granularity those users like. And they also can be presented to a smart contract, just like a token, to execute logic on chain. And so because these credentials can contain just about any data, in fact, I think that they're the best vessel for data that doesn't have a double spend problem, which is better suited for a public blockchain. But what this allows us to do is assemble a broad variety, a diversity of credentials sourced from the many different places where we hang out. And that totality of our impact is our reputation.
So as the first purveyors of data backpacks, how can Disco users expect their lives to change and, be improved?
This is a very exciting future. So in a few years, actually even in a few months, Disco users will be able to start visiting the apps that they already know and love, but experience an elevated journey. They'll have to fill out fewer forms. In the future, Disco will enable you to never have to fill out a form again because you will bring your data with you. We will end waiting in lines. We will change the way that we interact with the apps that we know and love. Instead of being seen as the creators of data that our apps feast upon, instead, we will be the happy users that our apps serve with value, where we can own and control our data instead of worrying about whether our apps will leak it or sell it. And we can indeed leverage that data for our own value. So imagine being able to pay for things with your actions, to receive free concert tickets because you listen to thousands of hours of music of that artist at home, to be able to apply for a job without filling out any documents because you can present your past work history readily in a way that your future employer can read and understand. We think that lowering the switching costs from one activity to another is one of the most fundamental ways that we can save time and have more fun in our ecosystem. Furthermore, one of the great challenges of Web3 right now is that because we are limited to our public blockchains for the most part, the only kinds of coordination problems that we can solve together are treasury allocations. We can only be a plutocratic group chat with a bank account if we want to work together in Web3, and that's not very fun. We can't do a lot of interesting things there. We can't plan a party. We can't build a messaging layer so we can check on Elon Musk on Mars. We can't even design a logo if we don't know who is a designer and we're letting the richest people in the room vote. And so the inclusion of our reputation in a self-sovereign way to our experiences means that we can solve much more interesting and complex coordination problems. If I know what you're good at, where you've been, who you're friends with, who trusts you, then I can understand which tasks are best suited for your aptitude and where you typically succeed in your contributions. And so I think that the future that we will enjoy is one that is full of more autonomy and choice and includes a lot less administrivia.
Amazing. So, okay, just to go back quickly to never having to fill out a form again,
Yes.
Out of personal curiosity, does that include passwords? Or is that a no-go?
That's a great question. So right now, largely passwords exist, username password combinations exist to gate access to different experiences, different apps or privileges within those apps. And I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have to manually create a bunch of passwords and then to remember them. I don't know about you guys, but I certainly have thousands of passwords and would have absolutely no ability to recall them off the top of my head without my, companion handy security applications. So I think in the future, we can absolutely eliminate many of the passwords and usernames that we rely upon by logically centralizing our identity and our data around ourselves so that we can present any one of our names and enjoy the full spectrum of all of our reputation without having to type in password after password after password or rotate them every couple months. And if that kind of security is required at the application layer, we should be able to automate it and obscure it away from the user.
Absolutely. I'm sure that hits home with a lot of you guys watching, maybe. So what does the roadmap for Disco look like at the moment?
So we are dancing into some pretty fun territory at Disco. Right now, we have just begun user testing, and so we are welcoming feedback from some of our most fervent early adopters in the crypto community. In the next few weeks, we will open our private beta program. So we will invite a handful of communities and Web3 apps to begin testing and playing with the capability of issuing credentials to their community members, verifying credentials that those folks bring to their doorstep, and improving the experiences of the human beings in between. Right after that, a few weeks later, we will open our public beta. So we'll broaden the scope of who is invited to the Disco. And then on the first week of June, it looks like we will become public to the world. So we'll open our API and SDK and welcome everybody to the dance floor to create their own Disco profile web app. Beyond that, for the rest of this year and the time shortly thereafter, we have a lot of things planned. We're really excited to explore more of the sophisticated cryptography available in our ecosystem to protect our privacy. We're exploring things like predicate disclosures that allow you to share a piece of your data, credential, with a zero knowledge proof so that your counterparty, the person verifying it, doesn't see your data, but only learns something about it. So the classic example here is that when you go to the bar with your friends and you hand the bouncer or the doorman your ID card, they get a lot of information about you that they don't need. Why does that person need to know how much you weigh or what your horoscope is? And so in the future with Disco, you will be able to present data about yourself. Let's take this particular example with your ID card at the bar. You'll be able to use a predicate disclosure so that the barman will receive a check mark or an X, a thumbs up or a thumbs down, determining whether or not you can enter the venue. So the question then becomes not what is your birthday, but rather, does your data fit my requirements? So in this way, we think we can kind of transform that question all over the place, where the plain text of our data will not be relevant to a given situation in many cases, but rather we will ask the question, does my data fit your requirements? And if so, proceed.
Absolutely. And I think the Avalanche Summit day one really needed that. If you saw the queue, it was ridiculous.
That is a really great point. Well, one of the funny things about live events in the crypto space is that we often rely on either Web 2 tooling and infrastructure to do ticketing and to welcome us into physical shared spaces. And I'm also seeing a lot of experimentation with NFTs gating parties. So online, it's very easy or fairly straightforward to use the ownership of an NFT to gate access to online tickets. But in physical space, that's really tough. We do not have a good method of verifying wallet contents swiftly at the door of events, whereas a verifiable credential can be verified in a matter of seconds, easily through a QR code, only using 2 mobile devices. So we definitely see, a great way to diminish some of the lines at these parties.
So can you tell me why they're not in use now?
Why are verifiable credentials not the hottest thing on the planet? I ask myself this every single day, and I think that there are 2 meaningful shortcomings. The first is tooling. So in the NFT space, we're seeing a proliferation of token-gated experiences because the tools and use case examples that are live are, very easy for others to comprehend because they can see them, they can touch them. The, tooling is well documented. We've got amazing teams like Collabland that have built, the ability for us to have token-gated chat channels on Telegram and Discord. And so similarly easy to use tooling for verifiable credentials that allows us to gate merchandise, content, ticketing, chat channels, and more, I think will help to popularize this primitive. But additionally, verifiable credentials did not yet have a globally accepted standard until very recently. They're hot and fresh out the kitchen. And so many people are not familiar with them or have not seen that there is actually now an updated version that is readily useful. There's also been a recent update to the Ethereum protocol. EIP 712 covers sign type data for those keeping track at home. But this amazing update now allows us to use our existing Ethereum keys to sign off-chain data in the same way that we can sign on-chain data. It used to be back in the day that you'd need a separate application, separate key management, separate set of keys for your private data, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. Or rather, it was a very challenging user experience, challenging technical experience to build for. And I also think, identity is a bit of a fuzzy subject, because it's not a clear string of numbers and letters like we're used to for many other assets. And so the amorphous or organic and constantly evolving nature of these primitives and the way they are used means that this is a pretty tough challenge to tackle. I know in the blockchain community, we really love our technical problems. We love, utilizing our technical knowledge to work on tough challenges like scaling. But you don't need a bigger club if no one can get into your party. And so I think that, the age of verifiable credentials is upon us, because if we want to welcome the next billion users into the metaverse, we need to offer easy onboarding that doesn't require you to pull out a credit card to start, and verifiable credentials are free to issue and very simple to carry around and verify. But beyond that, verifiable credentials also offer a level of expressiveness that we cannot achieve with the public chain. We can put data about ourselves, about our friends, about our private lives into these units without expecting they're going to be put on blast to the whole galaxy till the heat death of the universe, which is what happens when you put something on a blockchain. And so I'm very excited to see amazing teams such as, Ceramic and Spruce really embrace and take leadership roles in the standards community as well. And then there are also awesome, vibrant communities such as Boys Club, which is a global community of women and non-binary people in Web3, really embrace the concept of these credentials and start to explore what it means for their community, how they might put them to use. So although verifiable credentials are not yet the hottest crypto primitive, I think it's only a matter of time until they become it.
Well, it's exciting to see. So for those watching at home who are, very interested in Disco, what can they do to find out more?
Well, welcome, future Disco nuts. We are so excited that you're here and can't wait to bring you into the fold. So if you are excited about Disco, please follow us on Twitter at DiscoXYZ, Instagram at disco.identity, or write us a note about your dreams for the metaverse at disco.xyz, our website. And we are so excited to hear how you hope to use these technologies in the future. And if you have a specific request for your project, a specific dream for the experiences you hope to have in the future, let us know and we'll help you build it and we can do it together.
Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much, Evin, for your time, and we'll see you next time. Bye!